Welcome to A Real Affliction, BPD, Culture, and Stigma, a podcast devoted to exploring how we experience, treat, write about, advocate for, and conceptualize borderline personality disorder. My name is Cynthia Gralla. I'm a writer and teacher with a history of BPD. Trigger warning, this episode will mention suicide. In the second part of my interview with psychotherapist, award-winning author, and licensed martial artist Ellis Amdur, he'll present a case study of a woman with BPD. When he met her, she was in a state of severe distress, and his availability was too limited to do a time-consuming therapy like dialectical behavior therapy with her. He also noted that this woman engaged in recreational bondage and enjoyed being bound in elaborate ties. So he decided to teach her movement exercises based on Baduanjin Qigong, that's spelled Baduanjinqigong. It's a Chinese breathing and movement system similar to Tai Chi. The treatment was successful, and after 6 weeks, the woman felt that her suicidality had passed. I was so excited to have Ellis share this experience on the podcast because I believe that movement therapy could be one solution to the need for interstitial support that I referenced back in the second episode of the podcast with Bailey McKnight of the BPD Society of BC. In other words, since dialectical behavior therapy, the most common therapy for BPD, involves reprogramming long-established patterns of thought and behavior, it takes time to work. While we wait to feel better, or while we wait to find a therapist, a lot of us struggle mightily with our BPD. So some type of movement therapy may be beneficial as a supplemental therapy during this period. Ellis's story about this woman resonated deeply with me. Dance has helped me to find moments of healing during some of the worst periods in my life. Ballet became a trusted partner as I transitioned from several years as a pre-adolescent anorexic to a more curious and healthy relationship with my growing body. At college, I fell in love with Butoh, the Japanese avant-garde dance form. The writer Yukio Mishima called Butoh a dance of crisis, but unlike ballet, where the crisis must be manufactured through balancing on point shoes, Butoh drew on the everyday crisis of the body. I could have easily described the way I wrenched out of my fetal position as I sobbed and flailed after heartbreak. Through Butoh, I could express the pain that I felt in my body every day. And like the woman whom Ellis helped in the following story, I also found peace within complicated bondage ties around the same time. As Ellis explains in the second part of my interview with him, he is retired from therapy practice, but is willing to train therapists interested in learning this technique. When I asked him about other movement therapies that are available, we referenced Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, which gives a quick overview of two body-based therapy methods, sensory motor psychotherapy and somatic experiencing. For anyone interested in healing through movement, especially for trauma, those two therapies might be a good place to start. And now, here's the second and final part of my interview with Ellis Amdur. Just to give a little background, we were talking by email, I think it was maybe actually a couple of years ago, about BPD. As you say in your talk, people with the borderline style don't have emotions. Emotions have them. You know, we're constantly in this vulnerable state when in great distress. And you wrote to me that many treatments for BPD work on mindfulness and relaxation. That's good, but they are missing something essential. It's not that those with BPD are too tense. Rather, they lack a layer of protection over their nervous system. They feel everything far too much, and the result is that they are like a baby that cannot settle. And I like that. Yeah, the kind of fitful baby, which isn't to say that they're childlike. It's just when you're in that state and you can't settle down. They relax and freak out. They tense and they freak out. So, can you tell me what you found and why you found this Baruan Jin Qigong? Like, why did that help with that aspect of
Okay.
it?
So it's a kind of flamboyant story. And I need to also preface that I'm retired. So if people happen to be interested in this, I would be happy to instruct people on how to do it as clinicians, but I'm no longer doing the work
Yeah,
on the
it's
front line.
good to clarify that. But it might give just ideas to other people or yeah, another therapist who wanted to learn it. And just I want people to know that there are a lot of ways to approach distressed states. And I think this is a really unique one.
Okay. So I was contacted by someone who said that one of his partners was suicidal. He was in a polyamorous relationship, and so had several partners, and all this being voluntary, consensual, and everybody's into it. Also, there's a lot of BDSM in their world, bondage discipline, sadomasochism, which, again, if this isn't your world, it's not mine either. But for a lot of people, even hearing about that, immediately people think, what a terrible thing. There must be
Right.
whatever they think, right? So
Yeah.
I just have to put this out as a preface because basically this is these people's lives. So I went to visit the location, and there was a young woman, very tall, lithe. You could clearly tell she was an athlete. It was a hot summer day, maybe 85 degrees, and she's got a trench coat down to the ground. She's shivering with fear because she thought my purpose was to take her to a hospital somewhere. Most people will assert that anybody in the borderline style has been abused. That is not, in fact, true. Many people have. The easier way to conceive of this is people are born with an innate level of sensitivity to the environment. And if you are a very profoundly sensitive person, you might be brought up in a lovely home or a lovely environment, and you will be a sensitive, healthy person. Maybe very emotional, very artistic, whatever. But that said, you can be sensitive enough that even if your home is loving and reasonable, that sensitivity is so much that the world affects you too strongly. Remember the image I had of the spinning top, and just the nudge of a flower at the wrong moment set you off. Now, it is true then that somebody who is sensitive is uniquely vulnerable to predators,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Because they are definitely going to perceive those people who they can most easily affect, right?
Mhm.
So, just as a preamble, that this individual, she did not have a history of abuse. One of the activities that she and her partner were very much into was she would be bound in very elaborate, full body bindings, suspended from the floor
Right.
in incredible contortions. So, that was a primary part of their relationship. Now, when I met her, as I say, she was very suicidal. When I spoke with her for a while, I got the sense fully in this borderline style. And I'm working all by myself. I generally see people once a week. I do outreach. I would do outreach to their home. And I could really see, like, for example, the very famous DBT style, dialectical behavioral therapy, which for many people is a very good therapy. But that's like 5 days a week. It's a whole, I can't provide that. And so I started just mulling over, why would it be rewarding to be bound and immobilized? And again, there can be all sorts of reasons, but the one that came to me is, if I were bound by an external force, I could relax because it wouldn't be up to me to relax. And see, to me, that's the problem with just teaching mindfulness. I relax and then, and so there's a form of Qigong or Chinese exercises. I'm going to do this seated, just one of them, but you'll just sort of inhale. There are many ways to do this. One way to do this is there's just a slight bit of tension, and then you relax, more like Tai Chi. But another way you can do this is you do a pretty forceful stretch of the tendons, and you've inhaled, and then when you can't stand it anymore, you relax. Now I'm going to do another one just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
Now I have one hand down and one hand up. So I thought to myself, remember what I said a lot earlier about how, in a sense, people do to themselves without knowing it, the personality disorder. not just generated by oppressors, it's internally generated. Oppressors can certainly participate. And so I thought, okay, what do predators do when they victimize somebody? They manipulate tension and release, and that's called grooming. So if somebody is going to groom me, there's all kinds of things you hear about, giving people compliments when that's surface stuff. The heart of it is that person is going to make me somewhat uncomfortable. And I'm trying to organize around that discomfort. So for example, if I just, right? And I'm staring at you and you say, God, he's too close to me, staring at me. And then I pull back and I say, for example, hey, do you mind if I get a glass of water? I'll be right back. And what happens, you feel, and on the surface, you're in control because I just made a request. And you feel relief when you give me what I ask for. And what the predator is starting to do is train their prospective victim in feeling good because the pressure's off when they ask for something. Is it all right, put a hand on your shoulder? Like that. Sorry, that was very creepy, but you understand what's happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So there's this manipulation of tension release. And when people are trapped in different personality styles, and people are trapped, what's going on is whatever state they're in, they can't stand. That's why substance abuse is so attractive, because I can't stand where I am now, but I pop 3 Xanax, I will definitely be somewhere else.
Right.
So what I proposed to this woman, once it was clear that I wasn't taking her away anywhere, and I asked if she had a place of her own because I didn't want to be on, her partner's ground. She had a partner of her own. And I said, instead of doing what you think therapy is, how about if we do these exercises and like at the end of each hour, we'll talk for 10 minutes for whatever you want to talk about. She caught on very quickly. We would do 2 of these exercises a day, right, for 50 minutes, and she would practice on her own. So here's the basic idea. I'm tense to the degree of discomfort. I don't want to be tense to the degree of discomfort. I relax. I relax to the degree of vulnerability. So I tense. And so what's happening is you get the experience physically. This is all under my control. Tension and release is all mine. I determine it, not you. And I just had a theory which has borne out with different people, first with her and then with others. It sinks deeper, reverberates internally. And so literally we worked together for 6 weeks. You know the usual cliche about the borderline style, oh, it's a many-year thing. I'm not generalizing, but I'm just saying from a person who was profoundly suicidal, 6 weeks later, she said, I think I'm good. I said, well, sure. Okay. How come? And she said, well, I was with my guy and I was on the back of his motorcycle and we slid and hit a light pole and he had a broken collarbone and hit his head and he was kind of delirious. And usually I would freak out, but I tended to him. Somebody else came along. I told them to call 911. I talked to the ambulance person. I got everything in order. I handled the whole thing. And then I got home and my mom called and my mom asked me how my day was. And usually I would tell her how my day was and then she would freak out and that would freak me out. Right. And among other things, she had this level of anxiety that she would be afraid that due to her, terrible things would happen. And when terrible things didn't happen, because she was very smart and she understood these ideas in physics that there's a multiverse, that she would think that in another universe, my actions have destroyed somebody else. So it was an endless sort of loop that she couldn't escape from. And so here she is, and her mom asked, how was your day? And she said to herself, I realized I can tell her only what I want to tell her. And so I just said, I had a good day today, Mom. How about you? And so she realized that, it's not like everything in her changed, so to speak, but she realized she had choice in her experiences. And sort of, I heard through the grapevine, she used to wear and again, this may make some people uncomfortable, but it's a style. She also wore a slave collar. And the purpose of that is also it's containment. I'm going to adopt some rules. I live by these rules so I don't have uncertainty in my life. I'm externally controlled. Well, she took a pair of bolt cutters. She cut that off. Nice. And from all I hear, over the years, she continues to lead a very adventurous life of her own. but she manages tension and release. And what I found in working with a very limited number of people, working with people who experience severe anxiety, who are to some degree the borderline style, to some people studying with low-grade bipolar disorder, that generally is neurologically based. But again, does that mean you are totally helpless in that? Or is there you have some control? And also for teens in a detention facility with all that they were struggling with, it just seems to be a very powerful technique for people because it covers both ends. I can't stand it because I'm too stressed. I can't stand it because there is no stress. I can change that at will, and I don't have to change it by, for example, taking some pills or cutting on myself or something else that, you feel so helpless. All I can do is something really devastating to ensure that change will happen. Yeah. So when you realize you have control of that cycle, you don't have to go to devastation nearly so much.
Yeah, so great that it helped her. And I think that's just such a keen insight you had. I had some experience with BDSM years ago, and I probably, like she did, felt actually quite cared for in certain moments, certain ties. And it definitely makes sense that it worked. And as you say, there are these other treatments, and for some people, they work great. They do tend to take much longer. And there's also, I think, often a period where you start something like DBT or some kind of mindfulness program. It takes a while to work. Are there other people bringing movement to treat different conditions?
I'm so out of the loop.
Yeah, it's okay.
I always have been, which is maybe why I come up with some ideas. I know some people, there's a form of therapy called Hakomi therapy, which is a body-mind therapy. I actually trained it a long time ago. I found that at least the style I was introduced to was more for the worried well, so to speak. But I am aware that there's certain people who have taken that and worked with people in extreme states of PTSD. I don't know the name of the woman in particular who's doing that, but she was associated with Bessel van der Kolk.
I was just thinking of that because I just read The Body Keeps the Score, and I know he talks about somatic therapy.
That's the person. Yeah. And what I would say about the idea that I have is the one thing I do like about it is it doesn't conflict with any style of therapy I can conceive of. Right. You could do these exercises and you could discuss transference issues. You could do these things and work with cognitive behavioral therapy, whatever. The same way, like people struggling with depression, 20 to 30 minutes of mild to moderate aerobic exercise raises serotonin in the brain the same much as any antidepressant does. And so taking a brisk walk, does that conflict with your therapy? No, well, it's the same way. This is just something that enables people, at least some people, to start to get a sense of control of their life, of their embodied life.
Do you think most forms of therapy aren't addressing that kind of embodiment, or maybe not even, we don't have to limit it to therapy? Do we need more embodiment for our well-being?
Oh, yeah, on so many levels. I remember talking with Jim Hernandez, who's a man in California who worked with kids who were in gangs. And he said if he got access to kids beyond the latest junior high school, it was usually too late, that it was like being in a cult that you were too ingrained in. But one of the things that he noticed was how not in their bodies these kids were. And so he would take them out to nature and things like that. A bunch of kids all beat up in gang colors, but out in nature. And, I found the same thing when I mentioned briefly, and I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I did the same Bhagwan alternating weeks with a friend of mine who was doing Ashtanga yoga, which is very similar, in a detention facility with a rotating group of kids because they were cycling in and out. It wasn't a prison. It was like pre-trial, jail, things like that. And critical incidents in the facility went down 50% in the year that we were each appearing once a week. And so it's powerful. And all I had to do with the young people is, because I'm some adult, I'm an outsider, and we go through, are you going to teach me how to take people out with Kung Fu? And I'm not going to lose my job. I say, I'm not going to lose my job over you. None of this stuff works in a fight. And then I'd say, but don't you hate it when somebody makes you mad? And people would look funny at me. And I'd say, like, there you were having a good day, and somebody says something and they made you mad, they own you. If you practice these exercises, I guarantee you only get mad when you want to.
Yeah.
See, if I was going to say, you won't get mad anymore, it'll all be peace and light,
Right.
it would throw me off. But the idea of having more control over your own life when you're in a detention facility, when very little control at all.
Very little, yeah.
The kids just caught that. It really worked well.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for talking to me, Ellis. I want to sincerely thank Ellis Amdur for his time and expertise. Thank you so much for listening. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.